Welcome to Tommy Solo's Famous Friends. This is where I get to chat with people I've connected with over the years in the world of arts and entertainment. And today I'm very happy to have with me guitarist, bassist, songwriter, singer, arranger, producer, Fernando Perdomo. Welcome to the show, Fernando.
Hey, hi, Tommy. How you doing, man? Greetings.
I'm doing just well. We're actually calling from London to London. I'm at the other London, London, Ontario.
Whoa, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is.
I've never done Miami, Florida to Miami of Ohio, or Ontario, California to Ontario, Canada. But this is pretty cool. London, Ontario, huh? Hi, this is awesome. London to London, so close yet so far away.
That's right. Yeah. So I spoke to Carmine Appice recently about your new project, and that is really awesome. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go too, but my main focus today, as part of my Guitar Talk series, I wanted to chat guitars with you. Now, that's an interesting guitar that you're holding. It looks like some sort of a tele hybrid or something. What is that?
This is my new number one, and this is got an amazing, interesting story. This is called an electrophonic guitar modillo, and it has a built-in 18-watt amplifier, which is very loud, and it's got a built-in preamp with effects. And I actually got this guitar because I found out that I was going to be a contestant on a game show called Let's Make a Deal. And other people have been on it playing acoustic guitars, but I wanted to be the first guy to play an electric guitar on the show. So I got this guitar because it's a guitar that I could play without an amplifier. And it turns out that it outperforms any of my other electrics when it comes to just versatility. And it's an amazingly well-made instrument. It's got a roasted maple neck. It's got really amazing pickups in it. And the coolest thing about it is that, it sounds... It's got a really beautiful sound.
It's not really translating well to the recording here, but I can tell that is absolutely a busker's dream as well.
Oh yeah, I've actually recently was in New York, and I jammed with a street performer on the subway, and in those kind of like hallways, you get amazing echo, and it sounds so good, and it has built-in overdrive that's insane.
It's not really translating well to the recording, but I can well imagine how awesome it is. And I mean, imagine with the bathroom echo effect.
Oh yeah, totally. But this is the guitar that I played with Carmine recently at the show, and I've also used it on some pretty cool recordings. I just produced a track for a woman who is very popular right now. Her name is Sarah Beth Lieb. And she was on American Idol, and she was a very controversial American Idol contestant that was mom-shamed by Katy Perry on live TV.
Wow.
And she left the show. I reached out to her on Instagram. I ended up producing her version of Benny and the Jets by Elton John. This is the guitar that I played the solo on. I also have played this guitar on a bunch of other recordings, and it's quickly becoming my favorite. It's got a really interesting tremolo system. That's its own design, company's own design, and it's somewhere between a Bigsby and a Kaler. It's got a really cool feel to it, and it has a great. It doesn't do the dive bomb, but it goes up and down, which I like, and I can do the Adrian Ballou tricks and stuff, and it's just a fun guitar, and this is the coolest thing about it. So when I used to tour long stretches, I'm a songwriter, and I would always bring a travel acoustic to write and practice in the hotel. Now I could bring this and one other electric in a double gig bag, and this will take care of that songwriting instrument, also practice instrument. Because look, us guitar, it could impede us to have to plug in stuff. So we usually practice on acoustic guitars or unplugged electrics. This is just one less step, and this could be your you always have on your couch, you can just grab and just shred, without any type of lag time to plug in an amp or anything, and it stays in tune great, and I love it. But this is my electrophonic, and this is the only electric I took on the trip, actually.
Very nice. And it also occurred to me that while you were in London, England, everything over there is 220 versus 110 here in North America. So that solves another possible dilemma in some cases. Now, I've seen quite a few of your videos, and you played a wide variety of guitars. How many guitars do you own currently?
Well, I had this discussion recently with someone. I've had so many guitars pass through my hands because one of the biggest addictions, I mean, look, I don't have any legal addictions, but my biggest addiction is reverb.com and eBay. I was an eBay guy, and then I was also a thrift store and pawn shop and flea market guy. But when Reverb took off and gave you that app where every chance that you have, you're bored, you look at your feed. And I was telling somebody, nothing is better for mental health awareness than a cheap guitar, an impulse buy, a fun pedal. And I have currently close to 100 guitars, but very few of them are more than 1,000. I generally go for, my sweet spot is 150 to 300. And I love making cheap guitars sound great, setting them up right, changing out the pickups, and sometimes not even changing out the pickups. Sometimes I like the impedance, the impedance of, I like the hardness of playing a guitar that might not be set up right and might not have the right pickups. Sometimes it might lead to some very interesting tones. Like there's a nuclear green Dean guitar that I have that has a green neck, and I bought it because I could do green screen with it. And I ended up cutting a lot of the Carmine album with that. It sounds cool because it's just got a really cool, it turns out it has a mahogany body, so it's like a mahogany Strat. My main guitar, on the first guitar I would grab in a fire would be my Mustang. It's a 74 Mustang, and it's been completely converted into Todd Rundgren spec with the three-way switch, replacing the little mini switches. And I put lace sensors in it. He has EMGs, but I put lace sensors in it. And that's my favorite guitar.
Do you know who Kim Mitchell is? Canadian guitarist, Kim Mitchell?
Oh, Kim Mitchell of Max Webster.
Max Webster. I met him back in the late 1970s in a guitar store in my hometown of North Bay, Ontario, Canada. Nice. And I didn't realize who he was at the time, but a good buddy of mine had just listened to a radio program where they were featuring new artists, and they featured one of the songs from the first Max Webster album. So from my perspective, I just see this tall, skinny guy reaching up for a Fender Mustang. And in my youth and arrogance, I said something snarky like, "Oh, you like those, do you?" And he turned around and explained to me all the technical reasons why it was an amazing guitar. It blew me away. Having said that, I've never been very lucky with the cheaper guitars per se, but I was in the studio myself recently where I had somebody loaned me a Les Paul that I couldn't tune. I just couldn't tune it at all. And so they handed me a Fender Jaguar. And the thing was huge, but man, I was totally impressed with the sound and the playability of that thing.
Well, I'm one for it's not the Arrow, it's the Indian. And there's a lot of incredible guitar players that play Squires or Epiphones or, cheaper Ibanez's and you know what, man? I mean, there's something wonderful about boutique guitars. Like I went to Denmark Street today in London, and they've got all these really nice shops where you could get a 63 Strat or a 60s Les Paul or stuff. You know what? That's fine, but to me, I love the concept of pulling out a guitar that makes people scratch their heads. And you know what? The thing about the Fender Mustang, 3 things about the Fender Mustang that make it a really cool instrument. Number 1, short scale. You can put 11s on it and they feel like 9s. Thicker tone, still slinky. Number 2, the vibrato on it. Before the Floyd Rose, that was the only way to do up, down, and you could do a whole step up and a whole step down. And that's how Todd was able to get the motorcycle guitar sound on the Meatloaf record. And
Right.
number three, they're the best balanced Fender instrument. No neck dive, perfect balance because of the small body and the small neck. It just hangs on you great. And Todd used to do this thing where he would just throw it on his back and sing, and it would never lose its position. So it's a perfect frontman instrument, and I love it. It's just there's something about it. I've always said that I play better on an instrument that fights me. Like I've played, some of my friends have really nice guitars, like Thur, or like a nice PRS, or like something that's been plecked and has like super low action. And I usually play too hard on it and it frets out. I like jumbo frets. I like 11s. I like to dig in. But what's funny? I like many guitar players were curious about the Billy Gibbons sevens, and I put them on a guitar of mine, and I love it. There's something really really funny about the way those feel. Then again, I put it on a Madeira, which is a Guild's low line guitar, and I got a great sound out of that thing. I used it on a couple solos, and you could bend 4 steps. You could bend like 3 steps. It's crazy. You could bend nuts on those things. But I've got a lot of guitars that I love. With Carmine, my main guitars were the Mustang, the Dean, my Yamaha SG 500, which is on the cover of the first Carmine record we did, called Energy Overload, and that's an SG 500 from '76, pre SBG, before Yamaha got sued by Gibson. And those are great. Those are Carlos Santana. Like, he's one of my favorite guitar players, especially Carlos Santana 72 to 80, especially the Yamaha era. Moonflower is my jam.
When I listened to the Running Up That Hill project, I listened to your playing, and it struck me that you were something like, I was going to say, a cross between Santana, Jeff Beck, and Billy Gibbons.
Whoa.
So, yeah, like your playing you're like a melodic shredder. Okay.
Well,
so
that's a good point. We were talking, Carmine and I were talking about it, and there's been a situation where 95% of instrumental guitar records are shred. And nothing against Joe Satriani or Steve Vai or any of those guys, but I like to make the guitar sing, and I like to create melodies that people could sing. And when it becomes a technical dexterity situation, number one, it's never gotten me off. I grew up listening to George Harrison, Neil Young, all the guitar players in Wings, Henry McCullough, Jimmy McCullough, Lawrence Juber, and I always loved melodic playing. To me, the two greatest solos of all time. I'm gonna do them back to back.
Again, it's not really translating to the recording, but I can tell you're playing the solo from Something. Yeah, Something is one of my all-time favorites as well. It doesn't really translate to the recording process here with the Zoom, but yeah, Something is some. Yeah, I don't know why when you start to play that it just breaks up, but I know Something is one of my absolute favorites as well, and it's because you can sing it, and like you say, you like to make the guitar sing. That to me is the essence of a really talented guitar player. And Steve Vai and Satriani, that's their brand. The shredding like that. So they're stuck in that box. It's kind of like,
I love them, and they are incredible. And you know what? They have their moments. Always with me, always with you. There's really incredible stuff. But here's the deal. The thing that blows my mind, about guys like Jeff Beck. I got to see Jeff on his last show in LA. And I got to see Jeff at his 70th birthday party at the Hollywood Bowl where he recorded a live album. And I got to see Jeff 10 years before. He emulated the human voice. Everything he did in his vibrato, in his sliding, in his whammy bar technique, into his volume swells. And to me, he was the greatest because he's untouchable. Carmine likes to compare me to Jeff. I mean, look, I've got a lot of Jeff in me, but Jeff's playing was so clean and he never played a bad note. And oh my God, he knew how to compose a solo. He knew how to play to the song, and he knew how to build up a solo so that when he started ripping, it hits you. And, his loss, it's the biggest loss in guitar that we've had since Gary Moore, And
as a guitarist, I cut my teeth on Jeff Beck as well. And when you say that he made the guitar sing, I remember the first time I heard his instrumental cover of the Beatles' "She's a Woman."
Yeah.
And it's like you hear the lyrics in his playing. Just beautiful.
Well, his versions, have you heard his version of Caroline No by the Beach Boys? Insane. And his version of A Day in a Life. And they just released one of the last recordings that Jeff Beck did was a cover of Moon River with Eric Clapton.
Right.
And that is a must hear. It is tears, because that song is so important to me. And his rendition of Moon River is a must hear.
And this is why it's important for us guitar players to document our playing, because now we've still got Jeff Beck's soul with us. He expressed his soul through his instrument, and we still have him with us because of that.
I tell that to all my clients. Your music is going to outlive you. And our service is to make sure that our legacy is captured. Because, man, that Jimi Hendrix only had a 5-year career. Imagine if he never hit record.
Yeah.
There's so many artists.
Here's an example. When I interviewed Carmine last week, I forgot to hit record on the video. So I've got a really wonderful audio interview with Carmine, but the video is lost.
Yeah, but you know what? Carmine is, oh man, the joy that Carmine has for music is so inspiring to me because, I'm 42, I'm turning 43 soon. And, it's amazing that he's 76. And I hope that he'll have the same inspiration when I'm 76, and the same amount of drive and the same amount of joy. Because, man, watching him behind the kit while I was playing guitar was truly one of the greatest moments of my life. Because, watching him, it's like a kid, he really turns he turns into 17-year-old Carmine on the Ed Sullivan Show, It's amazing.
It's interesting. I was going to ask you about that connection because I know from your biography that you're 42 and he's, like you say, 76. So I understand that you connected through another producer who's now no longer with us, Tom Dowd. How did that happen?
Well, I'm from Miami, Florida, and I was very lucky to have an incredible music program in my high school. And that music program was called Rock Ensemble, Classical Guitar Ensemble, and Electronic Music, which was run by a guy named Doug Burris, who was an incredible music teacher who had superpowers because he was quadriplegic because of multiple sclerosis. So he would teach us by telling us what to do and having the older students help us if we needed hands. But the fact that he was in a wheelchair and could only move his head led to the respect level being so much higher. And when you respect a teacher like that, you learn way more because there was less kids, making fun of him or being, or being assholes, because
Right.
that's
Yeah.
unfortunately happens so much. And the thing is, um, we had mentors, and one of the mentors that would come in and teach us was Tom Dowd. I met Tom Dowd when I was 16 years old. And a lot of other kids were like, who's this old guy? Who's this old weirdo? To me, I knew about Layla. I knew about the Allman Brothers. I knew about all the stuff that he had done. And I looked up to him. And I remember telling him that I wanted to be a producer. And I remember going to an event called Grammy Hall of Fame in Miami. And he said, "This is Fernando. He's 17 years old. He wants to be a record producer." And I'll never forget that, because when Tommy Dowd tells you that you're going to be a record producer, I think that's the only choice you have. So since then, I've produced records for all my entire life. And we lost Tommy about 10 years ago, and I became very good friends with his daughter, Dana. And one day I wrote on Facebook, "Does anybody know Carmine Appice? I have a song that would be awesome for him to drum on." Dana calls me and says, "Expect a phone call within the hour." Carmine calls me and he said, quote unquote, "I don't work with any old schmo. I'm very selective about who I work with. But if Tommy Dowd's daughter says check you out, I checked you out. And I like what I hear, and let's work on something." Oh. So,
Mind blown. Yeah.
next thing you know, he sends me a demo he did on his iPad. The song was called Thunder. And within the hour, I had created a whole song around it, and he was cutting drums to it. So that was it's really interesting. There's three ways that the Appice Perdomo project writes. One of them is he sends a demo. The other one is I send a demo. And the other one, which is the most fun, is when he sends me a drum track, just a random drum track. And I'll write to the drum track. And you know what's funny? Most people would chop them up. I like the idea of having a drum track that goes all the way through. But it's great because I'll just sit there with the drum track and just write a whole song to it. And, it's fun because it's like jamming with a drummer. And it's great because I drum too, and all I got to say is we speak the same language, and I can sort of sense what his fills are going to be. And, his fills are legendary. And thinking like a drummer, I know exactly what to do to enhance his fills as opposed to competing with his fills. And I tell you, man, Carmine is he's a master. And
Yeah.
to sit there and write to him. Oh man, and I gotta frame this. One time I sent him a demo and he wrote me back saying, "I need to find my calculator, man. What the hell's going on here?" I'm like, "Did I just stump you?" I came up with a part that had like a 13 in it, and it drove him a little nuts. But you know what? It ended up fantastic. And you know what? We have a lot of the same influences, and we also have a nice yin yang because I'm not really a metal guy, and he went into that world of into the world of like Ozzy Osbourne and King Cobra and like that. And he's got a lot of. I mean, he kind of invented the metal drumming style, But even when I do, like, there's a song we have called Biker Gang where I'm doing like this like super metal-y riff. It's
Yeah.
still passionate, I don't tap. I don't really do like sweep picking and stuff like that. Really, I'm approaching this. Guys that I've approached that have influenced my playing with Appice Perdomo, Jeff Beck, Bernie Marsden. Bernie Marsden from Whitesnake, Gary Moore, Alan Holdsworth. All the Jean-Luc Ponty guys. One of my favorite styles is jazz fusion, 70s jazz fusion. So, like, I'm obsessed with the album Enigmatic Ocean by Jean-Luc Ponty. If you haven't heard that record, it's Alan Holdsworth and Daryl Sturmer on guitars, Jean-Luc Ponty on violin, Alan Zavad from Frank Zappa on keys, Ralph Armstrong on bass, and it was the first record that Steve Smith of Journey played on. and it's amazing. And that record, huge influence on the way I write, huge influence on the way I play. Daryl Sturmer. I mean, I can't play like Holdsworth. Holdsworth is so fluid and he plays like a sax player. But the Daryl Sturmer lead guitar sound, that's a huge influence on me. I love that stuff. I also love Peter Banks of Yes, Steve Howe of Yes, Steve Hackett of Genesis. I'm a huge prog guy. I love Curved Air. I love Caravan. Um, I love Todd Rundgren. Todd Rundgren's Utopia, the first album, especially with the eyeball. That stuff is all. Todd's an interesting person because he's not a prog guitar player per se, because he comes from the Eric Clapton school of blues guitar, but he figured out a way to play prog, and every note slices you in half. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah. Those are all really amazing guitar players and very melodic players as well. Now, you say you don't tap, but I did notice that you use all four fingers on your fretting hand, which is something a lot of guys don't do for whatever reason. And I think Steve Hackett falls into that category where he generally just plays with the three fingers, whereas Howe definitely uses all four. And there's so many advantages to using that pinky along with the other three.
I blame it on classical guitar. I did classical guitar in high school. I also blame it on so naturally I prefer the sound of four note chords. So I'm always playing four note chords.
Okay. Yeah, we're not hearing it, but I get what you mean.
One of my favorite techniques is also I like doing the hammering off technique.
Hammer-ons and pull-offs.
Yeah. I did a little bit of jazz in college, and I learned a lot about phrasing. And a lot of it is in a lot of that stuff, and that's why I use my picking a lot. I also do a lot of octave stuff. And sometimes, especially as you go high, as you go lower, you gotta have the picking. And when you do the
spread,
a lot of octaves. A lot of Wes Montgomery stuff. And I love that. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of jazz. We actually had an amazing full circle moment, and this is so cool. So we played in New York at the Cutting Room, and we had played at the bitter end for Richie Cannata's jam. Richie Cannata was the original sax player for Billy Joel. He's the guy. He's the guy on an Italian Restaurant and Still Rock and Roll to Me and all that stuff. Well, that guy has a jam every Monday, and we jammed. And he came to our show and brought along a guy named Gerardo Velez. Gerardo Velez played congas with Hendrix at Woodstock. And but I know Gerardo Velez because he was one of the founding members of Spyro Gyra, which is one of my favorite bands. I am unashamed, huge fan of Spyro Gyra. And there was a video. See, my brother's 16 years older than me, and he used to rent videos from Blockbuster. And he loved renting music videos and recording, the videos from one recorder to another. And oh my God, that video, which was called Spyro Gyra 1980, the early years, had Gerardo Velez in it. And that was one of my first introductions to instrumental music, which led me to go down the rabbit hole of Jean-Luc Ponty, Mahavishnu Orchestra, Weather Report, Return to Forever, Chuck Mangione. And that led to me making this instrumental music style that I do with Carmine. So it was really cool that he was there because, man, that Spyro Gyra video, I wore it out. I love it.
Yeah. Now, I know as a record producer, you give artists of all walks advice in the studio. if I were, say, a 15 or 16-year-old kid just getting into guitar, is there any advice or any tips that you would give me as a young guy just coming up on
Oh,
guitar?
tip. Start on nylon. Start on a nylon string guitar because it'll be less painful. And if you can bend on a nylon string guitar, you can bend on any electric. And when I was growing up, I had a nylon string and I learned on that. And it gave me so much power in my fingers. And when I then transferred over to the electric, I felt like, it was a painless situation. Another piece of advice, listen to as much music as you can. Because no matter what, my instruction, my teachers were great. But my best teacher was my record collection, hands down. And
Absolutely.
listening to as much music and as much variety. Because here's the thing, when I was learning the guitar, when I was 11 years old, 10, 11 years old, I was listening to Santana. I was listening to the Beatles. I was listening to the Who, but I was also listening to Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Tori Amos and Fiona Apple and Wallflowers and Hootie and the Blowfish, all the stuff that was on the radio back in the 90s when I was learning. But most importantly, I was very open-minded. One of my biggest guitar influences is Lisa Loeb.
Really?
Yes. And this is where it came from. She created ways to play chords with open strings that I've used all my strings. There's a song of hers called "Do You Sleep?" That completely changed the way I play a C minor chord, and then F sharp minor, and then this cool E minor, and then A sharp, G, using open strings. And it completely changed the way. And I remember going to NAMM and being in line. And I said, "You're one of my biggest guitar influences." She's like, "Really?" I'm like, I told her all the different ways. She's like, "Wow." She was very impressed. And I love her guitar playing. I love her writing. I love her. I just love her. She's amazing. And,
Well, it's interesting. You and I are not that far apart as far as players go. Behind me, I have 5 guitars here.
There we go. Yes.
Yeah, and one being nylon string classical guitar.
Yeah.
And I should say it's not as easy to play, but once you get the hang on this, and when you talk about open chords, man, before we started recording, we were talking about Dadgat, and there's a lot of players, like I can't remember his name now, the front man from the Goo Goo Dolls, singer, guitar player, invented, he invented his own tunings. And back when they were just on top, I was in a cover band, and I remember knocking myself out trying to figure out some of those songs on guitar because I had no idea. He played these tunings in such a way that didn't sound like they were altered tunings, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The tuning on Iris is so wide. I mean, I think that goes down to a low C, and it's really, really cool. A lot of those guys. I mean, I got one of the first concerts I ever went to was Leo Kottke, and talk about a champion of the alternate tunings. I love that stuff, and it's really cool, and I have a lot of respect for it. I personally stray away from it because I don't want to have to bring 15 guitars to a show just to play a set, because that's something that actually crippled Joni Mitchell. Like, she stopped playing shows because she had to wait for technology to be able to retune her guitar, and it's able to do it with the virtual guitar system, or there's lots of ways you could do it these days with a Variax. But I mean, man, Johnny Resnick, wow, very cool. There was lots of, two of my biggest influences were from the 90s. One of them being Steve Caton, who was the guitar player for Tori Amos. He introduced me to the world of volume swells. being able to play guitar with a piano player, which I've always loved. And another one is the guitar player for the Cardigans, Peter Svenfield. So it's Peter Svensson, and huge influence on me. I was a huge Cardigans fan. I still am. And if you want interesting guitar parts that are unpredictable, gotta check out Peter Svensson. The Cardigans are so cool, so cool. I love it.
Very nice. Listen, I don't want to take up your whole day. I know you've got a lot of stuff to do. Just quickly, what's happening for the rest of your stay in England?
Well, I am out here with an artist named Jim Camacho, who was in a band called The Goods, which was on Mercury Records back in the 90s. And we are playing together on Friday night at the Camden Club, opening up for Tony Moore, who was the keyboard player for Cutting Crew. And then this weekend, we're going to the Cavern Club and playing the International Pop Overthrow Festival. And I'll be playing 2 sets of my own, playing 2 sets with Jim Camacho, and I'll be sitting in with a band called Ex Norwegian. It's Holy Land. I mean, it's where the Beatles were discovered. So to be able to play that stage, I can't wait. It's going to be fun.
I am jealous. Listen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this with me. And until next time, cheers.
Thanks, Tommy.
That's awesome.
That was great.
Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a one-man production, meaning that I've done all the work, including recording, editing, guest acquisition, etc. And hey, here's some news. We've just recently joined forces with 519 magazine, so you can check out my interviews there as well. The theme song for Tommy Solo's Famous Friends is a clip from my original composition, The Burn, all rights reserved. If you enjoy the show and you'd like to help us keep it going, why don't you click on the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that stuff. We really appreciate it. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram. And until next time, cheers.